Barbara, we can invite our guests into the room. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, members, this is the 24th meeting of the Public Accounts Committee. You're most welcome, and as is normal procedure, the meetings are recorded and broadcasted at Parliament buildings and online. However, there could be a slight delay in moving between private and public sessions, so I'd ask members to be patient with the system. Can I also ask members that when you're speaking or asking questions, and our witnesses and guests, that they speak loudly and clearly to ensure that you can be heard. Can I also advise those in the public gallery that are very welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode, and that all devices are muted and connected to the assembly Wi-Fi, and the password is in the gallery rules, and it is not permitted at any time to take photographs or record the proceedings. Today we have apologies from Colin Crawford and Tom Buchanan. Okay, members. And can I refer members to a copy of the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November at page 6 of the pack? And if members have a moment, if they're content, I'll sign them. Are members agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Can I ask if members have any relevant declaration of interest to declare? Yep. All good? Yep. Thank you. Okay, members, you recall that following the publication of the Northern Ireland Non-Domestic RHI Scheme, progressing implementation of the Public Inquiry Recommendations second report, it was agreed that the committee would write to Neil Gibson, the Accounting Officer for the Department of Finance, seeking further clarification on progress against the recommendations of the RHI inquiry. At page 15 of your pack, you will find a response from the Department of Finance Permanent Secretary. Members, are you content that the issues raised in respect of progress against the recommendations of RHI have now been addressed? I think it's important, first of all, members, that we look at the letter that has been received. At this point, I think we could invite Dorina, the Controller and Auditor General, to the table, just if possible. Okay, members, so in your packs you'll have a copy of the letter. You'll also remember the letter that was agreed by this committee and sent for the attention of Neil Gibson as the Permanent Secretary for the Department of Finance in relation to concerns shared by this committee about the failure to implement the recommendations of the public inquiry into RHI. You'll see the response that is there, and I'll give members a slight moment to go through it. But there is an item, there is a number of things on the agenda that, on the letter, that I have a number of issues with. I think that the response is quite weak, and I'd be keen to hear other members' views in relation to that. And if the CNAG would be kind enough maybe to shed some light on the comment that has been made in terms of, in one case, recommendation 39 is, it is not clear what measurable action departments can take to demonstrate that the recommendation is implemented. That is not to say that it is not being effected, only that there is no discrete process to demonstrate as much. I'm unsure of what he means by that, so it would be appreciated if maybe during a moment you'd... Is members anything in relation to the letter, first of all? Dan?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, for clarity, to understand the dates around this. So obviously the inquiry or the Audit Office report on the follow-up went on. You had your recommendations, you went through clearance, and then you published your report. Just what date did your report get published? Just so we have an idea of the scale of time, because obviously we wrote as a committee to Neil Gibson, and he's got our letter on the 24th, and he said that they're bringing recommendations to the Minister shortly. So I'm trying to understand how long after your report was published is he bringing recommendations to the Minister, because I would have thought that those recommendations nearly should have been with the Minister before your report was even published.
Okay. We'll come to Dorina in a second. Any other members, anything in particular in relation to the letter? No? All content? Okay. Trina, is there anything?
Yep. We're just pulling up the publication date here, just so I'll come back to you on that one. But if in relation to your question on 39, if I can just sort of brief you and give you a bit of context as to what that is, and I'm reading from our published report. So recommendation 39 by the RHI inquiry team was any minister presenting the Assembly with legislation for approval should sufficiently read and familiarise themselves with that legislation, and secondly, ensure that adequate evidence base is publicly available to demonstrate that the benefits justify any attendant costs. So just to remind you, we did our first assessment on this back in 2022, and at that stage the evidence being put forward by the Department of Finance was that the guidance for ministers dated March 20 notes that ministers are to give accurate, timely and truthful information to the Assembly. When we then sought further evidence in our 2024 update, the only additional thing that was put forward was the requirement to really hold public consultation. And so we have no, from our perspective, we said we have no evidence that inquiry recommendation was actually being met. One of the things that the department's response, the department were, as Neil Gibson is with you, quite clear that they really didn't know what else they could do to forward this, and this was put to us, and you'll actually see in our assessment we commented that it's not for us to advise the department how to enact a recommendation of the inquiry. So we also note that it is tied into recommendation 38, where the Assembly have a role through the chairperson's liaison group to look at how ministers are reacting to the RHI inquiry as well. So that's a wee bit of context around that. In terms of the piece of work that's ongoing with the chairperson's liaison group, the last that we were told about that is that an update is going. There's an update meeting in autumn 24 of that group to consider further the recommendations of the inquiry that relate to ministers. So that's all we know to give you, a bit more context around recommendation 39 in relation to the point, Diane, you were making on the date. We published our report on the 15th of October.
That's the end of October. Do you want to come in on that then?
Yeah, so it's thanks for that. So obviously, the first recommendations from the inquiry was 2020. Mm-hmm. So your follow-up was 2024, and following, your publishing of the report, given that the department will have worked through with you all these recommendations, and then we have wrote on October the 24th for him to say that he's putting recommendations to the minister now. The point that I would make on that is this should have been live. There's been over 4 years. Why is the minister only getting these recommendations now? Is there a sense of urgency around what we're dealing with here? That would be just my concern on the reading of that.
I think, given the findings of the Northern Ireland Audit Office follow-up report, it's very clear that there has been no sense of urgency in relation to this issue, even though it was of such a serious nature and consequence to these institutions and to our society generally, not to mention the public finances that have taken a very heavy hit as a result of the feelings around RHA. I think you raised a valid point, Dan, that I don't see any urgency around this, and it really does seem to be this culture of not taking these recommendations seriously and not implementing them either. I think this is a full-blown public inquiry. And I just don't believe the response has been adequate. And equally, the letter in response to the concerns raised by this committee, I don't believe is acceptable. I think that's a very weak response to the concerns that we have raised, and typical of departments just to brush off the concerns raised by this committee, similar to others in recent times. Is any other members anything else they'd like to raise in relation to it? Do you have anything further you'd like to raise with the letter? Or?
No.
He has offered, the Permanent Secretary has offered to discuss this further if committee members feel that's appropriate. Happy to make arrangements with relevant officials. Members, any thoughts on that? Is that necessary, or?
I feel where he's offered, I would be inclined to take up the offer to try to understand just the commentary around it.
Members content with that?
Yeah.
So we agreed, then we invite or take up that offer.
So can I just check it? So it's the Department of Finance who are responding on behalf of all the ministers in relation to this issue, is that right? Because it refers to ministers are committed to implementing all the recommendations.
So the 42 recommendations of the inquiry were directed in different ways, and one of them directed at ourselves. The Department of Finance carry out a role whereby they publish an assessment of an update on all of the recommendations, but I wouldn't say they're directly responsible for them all. Different departments are responsible for some, ministers are directly responsible for some as well. The Department of Finance do a coordination role, and they publish an assessment of where all of the recommendations are, so that's their coordinating body. Some of them fall to them, but not all.
And do you take any assurance from that it remains the position the ministers are committed to implementing all the inquiry's recommendations as far as that is possible? Or what other issues are in contention around what's possible or not possible as far as you see it, Dorena?
Yeah. So there were 5 that we drew attention to in our report where I think we certainly didn't feel that they were implemented in full, and where they weren't being implemented in full, there were more than 5 not implemented in full, but we then had a discussion with the department about what further action is to be taken. And on the basis of those discussions and actions that were in train, in some cases we concluded that we did think the inquiry's recommendation would be completed. In the case of 5, we have said that on the basis of the planned action at that point in time, we raised concerns that the inquiry's recommendations wouldn't be completed in full, recommendation 39 being one of those 5 that we highlight. But there's still processes ongoing. I'm working from memory. I think there was 11, that there were still processes ongoing, but I might have that figure wrong, Colm. But it was definitely 5 then that we said on the basis of the planned activity, we were concerned that the inquiry's recommendations wouldn't be met in full.
Nothing in relation to your communication back and forward to date has moved that position, so I don't think we should.
Okay, so we're agreed then to invite Neil Gibson. Clerk, maybe you want to go on that?
Yeah, just to remind you, last week you agreed to write to Hawks to invite her back over the response where you wanted further clarification around major capital projects, and you requested that Neil Gibson accompany Hawks. So just it might be an idea and sort of more efficient if in that meeting Neil Gibson then was given an opportunity to deal with these questions and just do it all in one session. I'm still waiting for a date, but I will get back to you about that date.
Thank you, Clerk. Diane?
I was just thinking in relation to this, did Hawks have a role in this as well? So if they were both coming together, I feel that these recommendations potentially, I'm happy to take anybody else's opinion. I know it's directly into Neil, but I would be appreciative of responses in Hawks on this since they're affecting right across the civil service.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy. All agreed?
Yep.
Okay. Members. Okay, members, if you're agreed, we'll now move on to closed session. Okay. And we'll just allow a few moments.
Senate Chamber. Sound. Senate Chamber. Sound.